Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. I see lots of people joining. All right, welcome, everyone. We'll start in just a minute or so. While you wait, please sit with this question. What's missing from how we measure AI performance in agriculture today? We'll open with this poll once we get started, but right now we're just going to be letting people join. So while people join, think about this. What's missing from how we measure AI performance in agriculture today? Welcome. We'll start momentarily. All right, I see lots of people joining. All right. Okay, let's get started, everyone. Welcome again. Good to have you here. And welcome to the first webinar as part of a monthly dialogue series called Transforming Agriculture with AI, hosted by the Institute of Agriculture and Artificial Intelligence. You've had a question sitting on your screen for the last minute or so as people have joined. So let's not wait any longer. Let's see what you've been thinking. I'm now going to launch a poll and we're going to see what people's answers to this question are. All right. You should see a poll pop up. Two questions. What's missing from how we measure AI performance in agriculture today? All right, I see answers coming in. Pretty even. It's fun to see all of the answers come in. You'll notice that the last question is the last answer is other. You can select that, and then below you can also elaborate on that if you feel that we haven't listed one of those options here. All right, I'll give it another 30 seconds. Thank you for joining. Thanks for interacting with this. All right, what's missing from how we measure AI performance in agriculture today? All right, let's see what you all said. All right, the top answer, farmer-facing usability and trust. 68% of you, 69% of you, the numbers creeping up, farmer-facing usability and trust seems to be the top answer there. The second, kind of neck and neck, local language and dialect coverage and real world outcome data. Thank you for answering that question. It's kind of a perfect setup for everything we're going to dig in today. And with that, I'm excited to announce our host and MC for this webinar, Professor Monojit Chaudhry. Monojit, over to you.
Thank you everyone for joining in and also for participating in this poll. So I'm Monojit Chaudhry and I'm the Chief Scientist of the Institute of Agriculture and AI here at MBZY, and I'm also a professor of natural language processing. My work is at the intersection of low resource languages and equitable AI and how we can make AI useful for everybody in the planet and equitably so. So I'm very excited to kick off this dialogue series, which will be a monthly dialogue series on various topics. And today's topic is very close to my heart, and I'm sure to all of your hearts as well, which is on, setting the table, AI benchmarking for smallholder farmers. Before we jump into the discussion, I thought we should tell you a little bit about the institute itself because it's a new institute and many of you may not know about it. So we'll play a short video to tell you more about the institute.
Smallholder farms produce 1/3 of the world's food. Most farmers lack access to reliable agricultural data. Climate change, crop diseases, market volatility, Localized, accurate, and timely information remains inaccessible to those who need it most. MBZU AI, the International Affairs Office at the UAE Presidential Court, and the Gates Foundation have launched the Institute for Agriculture and AI, dedicated to advancing solutions for smallholder farmers. The Institute will unite global partners to create an open agricultural data corpus, a single trusted foundation that any country, any researcher, any developer can build on. The result? Tools that answer questions in local languages, identify diseases and pests, guide when to plant based on common grains, when to harvest to maximize revenue, helping improve yields and build resilience against climate change. The IAAI will develop multimodal diagnostic models, voice systems in local dialects, AI that understands not just crops, but specific regions, specific seasons, combining digital tools, training programs, and technical support to reach 43 million farmers with practical solutions, reflecting the UAE's commitment to AI for good, driving impact for farming communities across Africa, India, and beyond.
I hope you all enjoyed the video, and now you all know why we are so excited to have this institute, and with the help of Gates Foundation and the UAE Presidential Court, and of course with all of you, we are going to make all these dreams come true. So a little bit about the series. This will be Transforming Agriculture with AI, a monthly dialogue series where we are going to bring in various experts from the field as well as different stakeholders, and it will be an open dialogue. The most important thing that we want to accomplish through this is how AI solutions for smallholder farmers across global South like Africa, Asia, and of course leading to the whole world, including global North, and how we can accomplish this. So in every session, we want to close the loop from community insights to field-ready impact. So over the next 90 minutes, what we are going to do is we are going to dig into these questions around benchmarking today. So benchmarking refers to how we measure how useful is AI in a certain context. And you will hear a lot more from different stakeholders, for instance, the researchers who work on benchmarking to model builders, as well as people who use these tools in the field and interact with farmers and have deeper insight of what works and what doesn't work. But before we get into the panel itself, let me quickly tell you the agenda. So we will start with address by Stuart Collis from Gates Foundation, who will talk about what excited or motivated Gates Foundation to dream about such an institute. Then we will hear from Vikram Adve, who is a professor in University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, who will be talking about what is benchmarking, why do we need it, and as we shall see, he is one of the leading experts in the field of AI benchmarking for agriculture. And then we will jump into the panel. I will introduce the panelists when we get there. And finally, we will have closing remarks from Fatima Al-Mullah, who is from the International Affairs Office from UAE Presidential Court. Some housekeeping announcements. So throughout the webinar, we will be launching polls like the one you saw in the beginning, and they will relate back to some of the discussions that's happening. So please contribute to these polls, and those will also inform us about what you are thinking. Then there is a question answering section in the Zoom. So please use that to ask your questions, and we will take them at various points through the chat facility, and our panelists will answer them. However, towards the end, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session where some of you will be invited to speak out your questions and interact with the panelists directly. So yeah, so with all that, we are very excited to kick off this series with a session on benchmarking. So let me first invite Stuart to tell us more about what is his vision of this series and the Institute more generally. Stuart Collis is a Senior Program Officer for Digital Agricultural Solutions from the Gates Foundation. And Stuart has more than 20 years of experience in agricultural information technology. And at Gates Foundation, he focuses on digital farmer services, smart farming, and digital agriculture ecosystems across Africa and South Asia. He has been the driving force behind some of the most ambitious AI-powered advisory pilots targeting smallholder farmers in low and middle income countries. And he's the reason why most of us are in this room today. So over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Manojit. I appreciate the introduction, and good morning from Seattle, everybody, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Yeah, thanks for joining this inaugural webinar hosted by the Institute for Agriculture and AI and supported by our partners, AGX. I first wanted to just start with a thank you to the United Arab Emirates Presidential Court, International Affairs Office. We have Fatima Elma on the call. She'll be closing out later today. But the partnership between the Gates Foundation and the UAE Presidential Court has really been fantastic. And really appreciate the commitment to this work. Also wanted to thank you, Manojit, and the Mohammed bin Zayed University for Artificial Intelligence. Really appreciate the commitment you've all made to making this a world-class institution. At the Gates Foundation, we believe all lives have equal value. And as many of you would be aware, there's really never been a greater need for philanthropy to help people around the world. As you may know, we ourselves have committed to doubling our investment over the next 20 years. We'll be closing our doors by 2045. And in the time that we have left, we'll be focusing on some very specific goals. There's three major ones. Number one, that no mother or baby dies of a preventable disease. Number two, that the next generation grows up without ever knowing about some of these deadly infectious diseases. And number three, that hundreds of millions of people can break free from poverty. And it's on that last goal where agriculture is one of the best weapons, investment in agriculture, that we have against hunger and poverty. So the Institute for Agriculture and AI is built on this idea that agriculture and sustainable food systems are essential to our future. But we also know that artificial intelligence is part of that future. So if implemented responsibly, we believe AI can really help equitably improve the productivity, income, and resilience of millions of smallholder farmers around the world. So this is why AI and agriculture is one of our biggest bets, and might be one of the most transformative tools that we've ever had to provide farmers the knowledge they need to thrive. As many of you know, smallholder farmers don't have access to the knowledge and services they need. Many farmers don't ever see an extension agent. They don't have access to the tools they need and the services they need, either digital or in person. And as Manojit mentioned, I've been working in this space for a long time. Manojit is getting up to 25 years now. So, but like many of you, I've been excited about digital solutions in the past. I've been in farmers' fields to test an exciting new smartphone app, only to find there's no mobile internet, or nobody owns a phone, or the text is not in the language that a farmer could read. And these are just some of the realities we deal with. While these sort of infrastructural components are improving, we do think AI can help solve some of these issues. It won't solve all of these challenges, but it already is really starting to help us see how to lower some of these barriers. So lower literacy, being able to read in your local language or hear a message in your local language, to be able to interact back and forth with the system that you can really obtain relevant content that's tailored for you specifically. It's very, very exciting. If we can leverage that multimodal capability, multilingual capability, the reasoning and agentic capabilities of AI, then suddenly farmers will have access to the entire world's knowledge of agriculture, and it's just really, really incredible. So I think the pilots we've run, I can say again, based on sort of my experience in this field, that I've never seen adoption rates like this. We're now seeing really incredible growth in adoption of these services. And when you see it in person, when you see like a small farmer women's group interacting with an AI interface for the first time in their local language, it just really demonstrates how powerful this can be. When we sort of take a broader view, a sort of more holistic view of where this can go, we've run some modeling across just the 7 focused countries that we're focusing on at the Gates Foundation across Asia and Africa. That covers about 92 million farmers. And if just half of those farmers had access to AI advisory, so we're being conservative in our estimates here, and 21 million of those 92 million are actively using it, that alone would increase the average farmer income by about $166 per year. And that's about a $3 to $3.5 billion per year economic gain at a cost of less than $200 million over a number of years. So this is why this is one of the sort of big bet areas that we're focusing on. However, for those aspirational goals to be achieved, AI has to be inclusive. It's got to be contextualized. It's got to be sort of brought down to the local level. It has to be delivered affordably and preferably free for farmers. It's got to be accessible to everybody. And there has to be an enabling environment to support scaling. So one of the pillars that we're excited to talk about today is benchmarking, as Monojit mentioned. This is one of the fundamental aspects of making sure that AI works for everybody, is inclusive and is high quality. Because, if a farmer is faced with an unknown crop or livestock disease, can AI really diagnose that problem? Can it give the correct advice? Will it recommend the right treatment, or will it fail? Will it hallucinate? Could it potentially cause real harm and erode trust? So we need to really carefully consider all of these elements as we deploy these solutions. We're optimistic, but we need to be responsible as well. And we can have confidence in these solutions we're deploying. We can quickly identify where AI is not working, where to address with more training data or improved models or stronger guardrails, so that governments and agribusinesses can ultimately be accountable for these advisories. That's a big concern for them. And also so we can hold AI companies themselves accountable, so that we can make sure that there's action taken when model performance is lacking for the people that we care about. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. Appreciate the team pulling this such a great panel together. Also looking forward to the longer series to hear some of the world's leading experts on these questions that are so important to realizing the benefits of AI for the world's poor. So thank you, and back to you, Monojit.
Thank you, Stuart, for setting the stage up so well. And therefore, without further ado, let me invite our spotlight speaker, Professor Vikram Adve. So Vikram is a Donald B. Gillis Professor of Computer Science and co-founder and science co-director of the Center for Digital Agriculture. Vikram leads AI Farms, a $20 million national AI research institute funded by USDA. His team built Crop Wizard, a generative AI Q&A and decision-making system for agricultural professionals. And what is most relevant in today's discussion, in the context of today's discussion, is he heads the AI AgriBench, a public benchmarking consortium aimed at creating and generating trust and confidence in AI-driven agricultural advisory. So please tell us, Vikram, about your journey in building AgriBench, why this is so important.
Thank you very much, Monojit. I really appreciate the invitation to speak, and in particular in this kickoff seminar of the whole seminar series. I think you've picked a fantastic topic and a really important one. I'm just going to share my screen first, then dive into the talk. I'm assuming you all can see the screen. So I have been working in the digital agriculture space as a professor at the University of Illinois for many years now, and I lead, as Monojit said, the AI Institute. My main research is really on how AI advisory services can be greatly improved through the underlying research capabilities in both the AI side and in the delivery for agronomic advice through improved reasoning, through improved tool use, through improved um, uh, benchmarking as well on evaluating these. As part of the work, we started a benchmarking consortium called AI AgriBench, and we are in fact now expanding that for smallholder farming with anticipated support from the Gates Foundation. And I'll say a little bit more about our goals on that. So let me just start quickly with some context for the consortium. I won't spend too much time on this because this is meant to be a framing talk about benchmarking itself. But the AI AgriBench Consortium is a public organization that invites members who are interested in providing agricultural advisory services and in evaluating the quality of those services. We have a number of companies that are members. The founding members were, so it's led by the University of Illinois Center for Digital Agriculture, which I am a member. And then it's founding members are Bayer Crop Science, Microsoft, John Deere, and the Extension Foundation and Kisan AI. And a number of other groups have joined since then as well, including PXD, Precision Development, and Niriksha is here on the panel with us, but also Taranis, Digital Green, and Farmers Business Network. So let me just provide some context for the importance of benchmarking. Why is benchmarking going to be important in this space? As Stuart said, agricultural advisory services, or what are sometimes called extension services, at least in the US and a few places, are changing quite significantly with the advances in generative AI because of the power of doing multimodal analysis and synthesis on data, of doing reasoning for complex questions, tool use for data-driven questions, dialogue for interactive decision making. These are core foundational capabilities in large language models and AI models today, but they are leading to a number of advisory services. They started out as just basic chatbots, but they are really building many more features. And so, for example, there are some non-commercial ones like the extension bot from the Extension Foundation, Crop Wizard, which is an effort from my research group, AgriGenius, and others. But there are also a number of commercial services like Bayer's Eli, BASF, and Taranis, and Farmers Business Network, and many others have commercial advisory services. But it's not just these. So these tend to be focused on more advanced countries. But there are also a large number of services for farmers in the global south, including services like Digital Green, Kisan AI, Kisan Mitra, ISDA in Africa, and a number of others. And there are new ones being developed as well. And these services are having remarkable reach. And so, for example, Digital Green had a quote from an extension agent in India saying that using their assistant, she was able to answer farmer questions about climate smart pest management immediately and confidently. And by the way, it's been a really powerful tool to empower women in both advisory and in farming. In Africa, the virtual agronomist was used to improve sunflower yields. This kind of real world impact is what makes this advisory capability so important. And in fact, as you all know, so I use this slide for many other audiences. You all know this very well. The Gates Foundation is sponsoring a broad advisory service. The issue, though, is that there is no effective, standardized way to evaluate whether or not these services are delivering accurate, reliable, or trustworthy advice to their users, farmers, agronomists, and others. And to provide that kind of playing field, we really need a benchmarking platform. Now, who benefits from this? I think this is something that not everybody quite appreciates. Most people think about farmers as the main beneficiary of understanding whether or not an advisory service works well for them. And for sure, farmers are one of the most important beneficiaries of benchmarking because they need trustworthy methods to evaluate and compare these services and products. But in fact, the companies and the groups that are developing these services need a credible and rigorous way to evaluate the quality of their services and they need that for internal evaluation and development. And I expect actually that these are going to be the first real users of our benchmarking, of the benchmarking that everybody does, including the AgriBench consortium benchmarking. And they will then use them also to market the products and to compete in the marketplace. Funding agencies need these methods to monitor outcomes and prioritize investments. And I think this is one of the reasons why the Gates Foundation puts a very high priority on quantitative evaluation. Researchers need these to drive the research forward. In fact, we use these in our research regularly. And the community more broadly needs these to define goals and to drive progress. In fact, benchmarks have been one of the primary ways in which progress in AI, broadly speaking, and I'm not just talking about agriculture now, but the core foundation models and many others have been evaluated and progress has happened through that. And then agencies need these for justifying and driving investment. And in fact, the government of India, government of Nigeria, and others are interested in benchmarking for these reasons. So the way that we view AI agriculture, I won't spend too much time on this because it's somewhat specific here, but we are trying to make AI AgriBench be a trusted public consortium for evaluating accuracy and other metrics as well for tools and services in agriculture. And as part of being trusted, we think it should be neutral. We think it should be led by an independent body that does not have a vested commercial interest. So in the current consortium, it's led by the Center for Digital Agriculture at the University of Illinois. In India and the project that we're going to be doing with partners in India and partners in Africa, we are going to look for a local university or a local nonprofit organization to co-lead this benchmarking effort in these countries. Second, it obviously needs to be professional. It needs to be public so that all information is available to everyone. It should be commerce friendly. We do think that proprietary models are going to be important. There are going to be many commercial services in this area, and they need to participate in the benchmarks to be, in order for the benchmarks to be actually useful, because many people will get their services from commercial products. It needs to be really tailored. And in fact, one of the things we spent a lot of time on, and we're writing a roadmap document to spell out all of the different aspects of agriculture and AI that feeds into the agricultural advisory that need to be evaluated. And I can say a lot more about that if you're interested. But topics like general agronomy understanding, crop protection, nutrition management, weather-related decision making, these are all categories that need to be evaluated. And then it really needs to be future minded because the advisory services are still evolving and getting more powerful by the month. There's really remarkable progress happening on the advisory side. The benchmarking is going to have to also evolve, and we need significant research to drive that forward. So I'll just say mostly one last thing about benchmarking itself. The underlying language models and the AI models have many, many benchmarks that support them. On top of that, and those are not really adequate for agricultural users because they're largely generic and look at many different kinds of questions and answers. There are interactive question answering systems for agriculture that you might get, that a farmer or a user might get through a phone. They ask questions with voice and audio and text. And that is an essential level of question answering that needs to be evaluated specific to agriculture. And this could be text-based questions. It could be image-based, image and text-based questions. And these are two that we are evaluating now in the AgriBench consortium. But beyond that, more and more services are providing actual decision support. So you have autonomous decision services for agriculture being built as part of these advisory platforms. Several companies are working on this. Other groups are going to have these soon, and these need to be evaluated as well. And this requires data-driven decision making. It needs to be open-ended because these are often interactive decisions and they involve complex questions that need to be broken down into steps with automated reasoning in the underlying large language models. Data-driven tools are called and so on. All of that is in our roadmap for evaluation. But finally, and most important, what really matters is how do these services impact the outcomes in the field, on the farm? And this goes beyond just data-driven evaluation, which can be done virtually with leaderboards and so on. This requires farmer surveys. It requires, in some cases, actual field trials like randomized controlled trials. It requires, this is also where we can evaluate important metrics like usability, ease of use in particular, adoption metrics about how quickly are different services actually adopted by real world users, the actual cost to the user, and many other outcomes like that. And AI AgriBench itself um, is primarily focusing on the two uh, goals in the center of the screen, the question answering and the decision making. But we are partnering with others for the on-farm outcomes, and in fact, Precision Development (PXD) will be leading that in our collaboration for India and Africa. And Nireksha, again, as I said, is here on this panel and should be able to answer and say a lot more about that aspect. There are many technical capabilities that need to be evaluated and will be evaluated in our benchmarking efforts. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip all of the details on this slide, but I'd be happy to talk more about it when we come to the Q&A if you're interested. I just want to say one last thing about the goals for what we are going to be doing in the context of Indian agriculture and the countries in Africa that we will be working on: Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Rwanda. So this is likely to be a 2-year project. It is about to be, we're still working on the proposal. So I won't say too much about the exact time frame, but this is a joint effort between AI AgriBench and PXD. We're starting with farmer question answering. We will look at end-to-end quality of these answers. We'll start with English, but we will expand very quickly to several other languages. So our expected languages, some of them are Hindi and Odia in India, Amharic in Ethiopia, and probably one or two other languages as well in the second year. We will look at audio question answering, which really requires audio understanding in both English and local languages. We will look at weather-based recommendations. This is going to be one of the priority topics in the first year itself. We'll look at other factors going beyond just accuracy or relevance and so on, the more traditional evaluation metrics, which are critical for the underlying technology and the actual products, but then also looking at the actual user-facing metrics like the cost per user and also the ease of deployment in different countries depending on their infrastructure. And then working with PXD, we will do user experience surveys in the field with farmer groups to look at other metrics like the ease of use for adoption, the affordability for the farmer, gender bias. These are some really important outcome metrics as well. And we will also do quite detailed breakdown of not just an end-to-end accuracy, but the components of the system that feed into what the end-to-end user perceives, including how accurately was local terminology understood. So in other words, more broadly, how well is a language understood in an audio question or a text question? How good is the underlying agronomic understanding of these systems? How good is the tool calling accuracy? These are components that are needed in delivering the end-to-end answer. And you can't improve or understand the end-to-end metrics until you look at the details. And all of that will be part of our evaluation strategy. So I'll just leave you with this last call to join us. We really look forward to having support, advice, data, and anybody with expertise, especially in advisory services and extension services, or in the AI side of developing these services. We would love to have your help in both in developing and evaluating the benchmarks, creating the ground truth data sets, and then also in helping deploying them. Let me stop there, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Vikram. We will have the questions for later. People who have questions, please put it on the chat. Your talk reminded me, like we say, we need a village to raise a child. We need the entire community to make actual benchmarking happen. So, and it's so lovely to see that we have 300 plus people join us here today. And I'm sure all of you can help in all the ambitious but very important goals that Vikram shared. I have two more takeaways from your talk, which we will discuss in the panel probably in more detail. One is who benefits from benchmarking? I think that's a very interesting question we don't think often. And
Mhm.
the second is, it's one thing to benchmark an AI system, and it's a different thing to actually see the impact happening over time on real people, on real tasks. So I think these
Mhm.
are two important questions we should dig deeper in the discussion. And that's also a great segue into the panel. So let me first introduce you to the panelists. Uh, and I will keep the introductions short because I would like rather you, the panelists, to talk about their work more. So first we have Niriksha Shetty. Niriksha is the CEO of Precision Development, that is PXD. Niriksha has been with PXD since its founding, leading service delivery to over 40 million farmers across South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. So Niriksha, you are the voice from the ground, and we have heard a lot from Vikram also how you are, collaborating with AgriBench to make sure that we have the benchmarking efforts effect measured from the field. So we would definitely love to know more about it. Next, we have Sachi Desai. So Sachi is the VP of AI go-to-market at Bayer Crop Service Science. Sachi brings over 20 years of AI and machine learning experience with a deep focus on agriculture. And at Bayer, he heads the development of ELY, a specialized AI built on agronomy and Bayer's own data to deliver answers field advisors can trust. And Sachi, I look at you as the champion of benchmarking and the need for benchmarking for the whole community. So we definitely want to listen to your voice. Then we have Professor Yaojun Wang. So Yao Jun is an associate professor at China Agricultural University. Yao Jun leads the team behind the Shenong family of LLMs. These are China's first large-scale agricultural AI, trained across 90% of agricultural disciplines and already serving farmers across multiple provinces. I have personally looked at the Shenong models, and they are truly impressive. So you are the model builder's voice in this panel discussion. So would love to know about your experiences. And last but not the least, we have Elliot Jones Garcia. So Elliot is a senior research analyst at IFPRI in Washington, D.C. Elliot's work focuses on human AI interaction and the socio-technical barriers shaping AI's effectiveness in agriculture advisory services. He currently is finishing his PhD on the digitization of ag advisory at Wageningen University. So welcome all of the panelists, and let's get into the discussion. So to kick off the discussion, I would like to ask you, Sachi. So recently, you conducted this very interesting webinar on benchmarking at the World Agri-Tech San Francisco. So what could you summarize and tell us a little more about what were the main findings from there?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel with so many, not just smart people, but really engaged and active people trying to bring impact and help drive the value of AI and its promise into agriculture. Right? I think I jokingly say that uh, agriculture sort of failed digital rather than digital failing agriculture in the way we've seen the progress over the last few years. And this workshop we had, I was shocked at the level of attendance, support, and engagement. So, it was before a conference, right? People are still arriving and it was full of capacity. And what we started realizing is that benchmarking, and I think Vikram and Stuart both said really nice things about this, and the importance of it is it 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 really is a proxy to adoption. and adoption is a combination of the value it provides and the confidence you have in the solution. So I think the single learning we came away with across this room of 130 people and then a follow webinar which had about 300 or so people is trust is the rate limiting factor for AI adoption in agriculture, full stop. And it doesn't matter if it's a global north or global south. Trust and conf is important, paramount for the adoption of a solution to create the outcome that you're expecting. And I think this is something that's also important, what Vikram was saying, you highlighted. It's not about the models, it's about the outcome. And if I can use the model, if my outcome can be improved with the model, that's great. But trust, you need trust, which is a level of confidence, and the confidence is not just given, it's earned, right? And we realized in what the conversation was is, some model outputs, some experiments, that's not enough. As you start to talk to farmers and users and folks across the system, um, they have, it's asymmetric. You have as a farmer or a user or a grower, you have one shot a year essentially, and so a bad answer can impact you severely. Whereas the model developer, they can just keep running experiments and so forth. And so AI benchmark really becomes the foundational element in building confidence that leads to trust and adoption, right? That becomes this loop, what we call a trust loop of recommend, act, and validate, and then repeating. And so what we're starting to realize is AI benchmarks are the foundation of driving growth and adoption and utilization of AI. And that's where you start to deliver on the promise of AI in agriculture. And I think that's the main takeaway. I would encourage folks to look up the materials that was organized by Skyhaven Group that provided that. There's a couple good papers on this trust cycle and the importance of it. And again, Dev Global and the Gates Foundation are big supporters as well as Vikram. And I believe, as Vikram also said, it can't come from an organization like Bear, right? We're a big catalyst and believe in supporting benchmarking, but we also understand that as a private entity, everybody's going to look at the whatever term you want to use in your country, but like a little bit of a slanted eye, right? Like a crooked eye, that there might be a bias, and so you need a really independent body like the Center for Digital Agriculture in our mind, or others like the Gates Foundation to help drive that idea of benchmarking across the industry. And it doesn't matter if it's the global north and large operations or global south and smallholder farmers. Uh, Trust is paramount. Those decisions are all the same. Even the crop and the practices are different.
Thanks, Sachi. And two important points you mentioned. One is trust, and the second is proxy to adoption. And I think that those are great points. And also, I want to now bring in Niriksha to the conversation. Niriksha, you have been working with the real farmers. Tell us more about what you do, and do we see trust building up, or do the benchmarking really help in the process of trust building?
Yeah, I guess I'll break that question down into two parts. I think to your first question of how farmers are using these tools, I'll just echo what Stuart says, which is the intensity of engagement has been really exciting just to see, how often farmers are coming back. We're seeing over half of the farmers that are using these tools coming back almost immediately for multiple conversations. We're seeing hundreds of thousands of questions coming in. So I think that part is really exciting. But I think, and I'm watching the comments that are coming in on the chat, and there's a lot of questions about co-designing with farmers, farmer feedback. I think one of the things we've been seeing a lot is, you know, getting these solutions out into the real world also show you where things are not working. And you see things break at different points. Sometimes the model may be good, but the underlying weather data might be wrong. Or sometimes it's a perfect tool, but it's not actually designed for farmers to be able to use it. Even things that you would, intuitively think, like being able to record a voice query or being able to type, just switching your keyboard language on your phone. Those things can be like real barriers to use. And so from that perspective, I think benchmarks can, if well designed, and to echo what Vikram said, going beyond accuracy and thinking about things like actionability. Has the advice reached the farmer when they need it? Can they actually use it? Is it in a language that they understand? Is the input locally available? I think these benchmarks, yes, will be an indicator of trust, not just to farmers, but to governments and others that can make decisions to invest in these tools. But I think it's really important that the design of these benchmarks think about benefits, not just in terms of accuracy, but in terms of things like use, adoption, trust, impact, and actually weigh the costs of getting these decisions wrong for farmers.
And if I ask a quick follow-up on, since you work with the farmers directly, what's their attitude towards AI adoption in general? What do you see?
We're seeing a mixed bag. I think there's a lot of, back to Stuart's point, I think for many people, this is the first time there is access to real-time, real-world information. And so there's a lot of excitement associated with that. And I think we've seen a lot of excitement, particularly with voice-first technologies that really are able to speak with farmers in their local language when they need it. Um, We've also seen a little bit of frustration, when the answer isn't right or when the language isn't right. And I think those are useful signals to keep improving these tools. But I think the big standout for me has just been the volume of questions you're getting from an individual user. And so not just about, adoption of the practices, but I'm talking even the first step of like adoption of these technologies. Back in the days when we would run these IVR hotlines, you would get a few questions a day from a few farmers that are able to navigate those complex menus. And now you're really seeing, each session having 6 to 10 questions, farmers coming back multiple times. And I think that is really exciting. So I feel like if we can get the underlying information and the product design right, the upside is quite high.
Okay, thank you. And I would now like to ask you, Elliot, because you work on human-computer interaction, and human-computer interaction is all about measurement, how you measure if something is useful or is the user liking it. So from that perspective, right, and we have already heard quite a bit about metrics in the sense that some of the things, how we measure and does it translate on ground may not be quite the same thing, right? What we measure in the benchmarking. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Margit. Thanks very much for having me and the opportunity to speak. I think Stuart already gave a great starting point for this, but just to go into a bit more detail. Yeah, I'd say that we have useful metrics, but at the moment we mostly focus on what I would call techno-linguistic forms of benchmarking. So as people have mentioned, we tend to answer if it's accurate, specific, or fluent. But those metrics, and I don't want to dismiss them, but we need to make a distinction between benchmarking for information recall and benchmarking for advisory service provision. So a model might retrieve the right information. It might sound like an advisor, but that is different from actually doing what an advisor does in practice. And so that is where I think current metrics are still too limited. Most benchmarks that we're talking about and have today are rooted in question answer pairs, but they do not really fully reflect how farmers and advisors interact. So in practice, a farmer's question might be incomplete. The advisor might need to ask clarifying questions, or the right answer might depend on the farmer's crop stage or location, market conditions, or willingness to take some risk. So the question is not only did the model give the right answer, but it should also be, did the model understand what kind of advisory interaction this was? Furthermore, I think a lot of the current benchmarks start from this assumption that about what farmers need. So we often hear people talking about the idea that farm answers should be short, simple, and actionable. And often that's true, but not always. But luckily, I think the good news is that we didn't have to invent this from scratch. Agricultural extension work has already well-developed ways of thinking about farmer decision-making that can help us define better metrics. So, for example, we've been thinking about different types of farmer questions. And so you might have some questions that we might define as tactical. So we tend to understand this as things that are immediate or problem-driven, like my crop has a symptom, what should I do? And so, of course, this then requires a short and specific answer. But other questions are strategic. They have a longer time horizon. So, for example, should I adopt this practice or should I change this variety next season? Is this investment worth making? So these require more exploratory and contextual responses. They involve trade-offs and carry a lot of uncertainty regarding the resources that farmers may have and risk. So if our benchmarks only reward these short, simple, actionable answers, then we may end up with systems that are good at tactical advice, but weak at strategic advisory support. This is something we've been currently working on by applying like these extension-informed classifiers to existing farmer LLM interactions, with the idea to understand where in the process of learning or adoption a farmer might be. So hopefully with that, we can ask these more meaningful questions like, was the LLM response appropriate to the kind of adversary moment? And so, yes, my answer is, I think in a way we need to set the benchmark higher. And so the next step really is to bring in that extension domain expertise so that we're not only evaluating whether these systems sound like advisors, whether they actually support the kinds of advisory functions that farmers need in practice.
So my takeaway is then you are saying there is a lot to do in terms of even the research and how we measure things. Cool. That's always interesting for somebody like me, scientist who wants challenging questions. Now moving to more the technical side of model building and benchmarking. So Yao Jun. Shenong models are amazing. Could you tell us a little bit more on how did you train those models? Where did you get the data from? And how did you test those models? And what role does benchmarking has in this model building process?
Okay, thank you, Monijit, and thank you to everyone here. Building Shenong has been a multi-years journey. Let me share three things: how we collect the data, and why Chinese data was hard, and how benchmarks shaped the Shenong models. First, where the data come from? We started with the basics, textbooks, journal papers, extension manuals. This covers the core disciplines: crops, plant protection, soil, livestock, aquaculture. Then we layer out all the real-world voice, the China National Farmer Hotline, and the country-level Q&A records, and the expert reviews. Everything passed through agronomists, and we call this agronomist in the loop. For evaluation, we built a separate and held out set. None of it overlaps with trainings. And second, why Chinese agriculture data were hard for reasons. One, dialect and local names. For example, rice blast had different names in different provinces of China, and a model that only learns a standard name will miss half the questions farmers actually ask. Two, the paper-based knowledge, the most authorized materials still live in paper and manuals at county-level stations. And digitalize them takes a lot of time of our teams. And three is the noise. At online Chinese agriculture Q&A material is a huge in volumes, but the accuracy is uneven. And so we had to filter aggressively. The fourth, cross-disciplinary coupling. A real farmer's question is really about one thing. For example, it mixes weather, soil, pest, and markets. And so single discipline data cannot solve it. And one more challenge is labeling. Qualified agriculture annotators need agronomy background at crowd sourcing does not work for this. The third question: how benchmarks shift Shenong large models? And in the early benchmarks told us where we were weak. For example, aquaculture, tropical crops, livestock disease, that guards where to collect more data. Benchmarks also called a subtle filler model. The model would give answers that sounded right, but were just generic. So we built three stricter rubrics evaluate not only correctness but actionability. Most importantly, benchmarks give the team a shared definition of better. And without that, every model update is just an opinion. So my short answer, Chinese agriculture data is not just a translation problem. It is a knowledge fragmentation problem. And the benchmarks are what hold the pieces accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know that the issue of language and the contextualization and different words, etc., that you were mentioning is a huge problem. It's a I don't want to get into that side of the discussion yet because that's a Pandora's box. So we will get there, but not yet. Instead, I would love to bring in Vikram again back to the conversation. And by the way, it should not be only I asking the questions. So other panelists, please raise your hand or just speak up if you want to, add a point or a comment or even ask a question to a fellow panelist. So yeah, so my question to you, Vikram, is so I know how hard it is to build and maintain a benchmark and especially a leaderboard. And could you share the kind of challenges you have faced in the process, or even now you face, and what kind of how do you want the community to help you in that process?
Yeah, so there are a number of pretty significant challenges in creating the benchmarks and maintaining the leaderboards. I'll maybe highlight just a small number of them. One of the biggest challenges we faced in the first benchmark that we released in January, and which we will continue to face, is that in creating the ground truth data sets, or what we call the golden question answer data sets, that we will use to compare a model response, we need to have experts review those ground truth answers, questions and answers actually. And so bringing in experts who are often quite busy, and having them evaluate hundreds or more questions and answers is very time consuming. And in fact, it became a very significant delay in the process, which we are trying to address by improving how we, or using a variety of different ways in which we recruit these experts. And we have to do that in every local area because the topics vary from place to place. A second big challenge, which I think we will face increasingly as we go. The first round of benchmarks were somewhat simple in this respect, which is they were just based on text-based question answering. But the next three kinds of benchmarks that we are working on today are image-based question answering, and then crop protection, focused questions and answers, which involve pests, diseases, weeds, and how to treat them, and so on. And then third, complex question answering, where a decision requires breaking down a user prompt into multiple steps. There might be choices along the way, and then you might need to call tools to do data-driven decisions. Complex QA is a third category. And in some of these, there are going to be a number of technical challenges. Like for images, you need to have annotations on the images about what the ground truth, what they're describing, what the questions or answers could be. For complex QA, in fact, it's quite difficult to know what tools to use, because tools can be very specific to particular kinds of data, but different parts of the world may have different kinds of, for example, weather sources or others, which are essential for the advisory service, but the benchmark has to work for many different advisory services. So that's a challenge. For crop protection, one big challenge is that the actual products that are used to treat a particular weed or a particular disease are almost always, not always, not almost, I think virtually always commercial products, and commercial products vary from location to location. the regulatory requirements on safety and usage vary from location to location. But you create a benchmark that can work, that can test what product recommendations are being made. So we're actually kind of putting that away for now and focusing on the core diagnosis and recommendations just in terms of generic labels, sorry, generic chemicals, and setting aside the product specific details and the regulatory details. We'll figure out how to tackle them later. So there are a number of challenges like these that need to be incorporated in creating benchmarks.
Mhm. And you also mentioned about the users or who benefits from benchmarking. And interestingly, Niriksha is sort of a user of benchmarks here because she's probably looking at those and deciding which products to take to farmers. So this is a question for everybody, but specifically you and Niriksha, if you, I mean, Vikram and Niriksha, if you want to respond. That who are the different stakeholders who do you think might get benefited from benchmarks directly?
Let me
Farmers,
start,
of
but
course, but
Diksha is
other
going to
than
have
that.
lots to add to this. Yeah. So I think sort of the list that I had on my slide are actually the ones that we expect to be both the early users and the long-term beneficiaries. So I think the earliest users will actually be the companies developing these products because they will look at them and they will try to improve their products with them, and then they'll use it for marketing and so on. And then the government, the funding agencies will use them as well. I think the farmers, I hope, will actually start looking at the benchmarks in deciding which product to use, but that requires communication. It requires telling the farmers how to use the benchmarks, what they're meant for. I think there's a second step there of actually delivering the benchmarks to the end user, which are the farmers and the agronomists in the field. Maybe Shay, you want to add to that?
Yeah, maybe from our perspective, I think the way we think about it is there are lots of governments today that are actively making decisions about which AI tools to use, what to scale, what to invest resources in. And I think that is true for funders as well. And often what ends up happening is, there's a pitch or there's a relationship, and there are tools that are being deployed, but there isn't a neutral, objective way to know what's working and what's not. And for us, that has a direct impact on tools that are reaching farmers at scale. And that's where the value of benchmarks is really useful, is helping decision makers think about, what is accurate, what is usable, what is actually shifting the needle for farmers. And I think the really important piece there is farmers are not just recipients of the benchmarks, but they're actually contributing to those benchmarks. And we're making sure that their feedback, their local context is being reflected in that benchmark. So I almost think of it as like a bi-directional process when you think about who are the actual users of these benchmarks. And we're seeing a lot of demand from our government partners. They've partnered with a vendor. They don't know if they should continue investing in it. They don't know what their alternatives are. There are questions about trade-offs on cost and quality. And I think that's where benchmarks can really move the needle in making sure effective, useful solutions that farmers actually rate highly are the ones that are being prioritized.
I
I can
see.
add one
And
thing to that, and just to underscore one part of what she said. I'll try not to take too long. But I think this point about having farmers influencing the benchmarks is really important. And in fact, for the smallholder benchmark, we released a pilot smallholder benchmark in January. And those were actually farmer questions and answers, where the questions came from farmers, the answers came from experts answering farmer questions. And that's going to be something we're going to continue to do. But we need to break those down into technical details as well.
mhm.
I just wanted to add from more of the
What you're saying,
perspective
yeah.
of the companies, right? I think Vikram said something that's important, and just to be clear, Bear's a global company, right? So we deal both in the global south and north, and as we deployed our Gen AI solutions that we built in-house, they were deployed to our team members, right? And so there's excess of 10,000 people now using a Gen AI model, right, in agriculture to impact, you could say like 10x of that, right? So 100,000 people at a minimum, right? Large scale, small scale. The thing that benchmarks are important for us is to actually drive adoption and trust amongst those user groups. And I think Vikram is really right in the sense of it's the agri companies right now they're probably going to need to be the biggest adopters and the biggest drivers of this, and they need to have confidence as well. I can't just give a tool technology to a buried team member and have them just immediately adopt it. They're just as skeptical as a farmer because for them it's all relationship based, and one mistake is going to ruin that relationship, right? That they've cultivated over 5, 10 years, right? And similarly, when we think of smallholder, while the government's now taking a bigger step in countries like India, it's still typically most of those farmers have more interaction with their sales rep or salesperson as opposed to like a government provided agronomist or so forth, right? And so these tools there are also to provide more confidence in the farmer in that interaction, saying, okay, they have these are more unbiased answers now. So I think there's a big component in how the ag companies use the tools, how they get confidence in the tools, how they're able to communicate clearly that these solutions.
Uh-oh, lost Sachi.
Yeah. Okay, but Sachi's main point about trust building through benchmark is very important. And I had a slightly orthogonal question about trust of benchmarking. So in the general space of LLM, we see a lot of concern these days about over optimization to benchmarks. So when benchmarks are publicly available, we, builders of models try to design models in such a way that the models perform really well in the benchmark and the progress is measured by that metric. But that probably doesn't mean the models are actually getting better when it comes to real usage. This could happen due to several things, and one of the things, as we call it in the technical side, is data contamination. The benchmarking data itself could be indirectly or directly used to build a better model. So essentially what it says is if you release the data publicly, the benchmark data, it can be inappropriately used and there can be over optimization. On the other hand, if you don't release the data publicly, then I don't know what data you are benchmarking my model on, and why should I trust you? So that's a different question of trust in the benchmarking space. And it's not a question for anybody in particular, but whoever want to respond.
Let me take a first crack at that, but I think other people will have thoughts as well. This is something we worry about a lot, and we spend a lot of time discussing how to deal with this contamination issue. We, in fact, in AgriBench, do release the questions to the company that is providing a model and ask them to run the questions through their model and give us the responses back. But we do not release the gold answers, which are used to compare the model responses. And so that's one level of defense against a company tailoring their service to the benchmark too much. But the questions are still available to them. We actually have an agreement, a formal agreement, before giving them the questions, that they will only keep the questions for a limited amount of time just to generate answers, and only show it to the people who need to run the questions through their service. Now, that limits how much experimenting they can do later, but it is important to avoid, as you said, gaming the benchmarks by tailoring responses too much to the benchmark.
Elliot?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring it back to trust a little bit, in the sense that I think there's a bit of nuance to that, in a sense, right? So, and we're trying to deal with this in the AGX AI working group on delivery, and trying to pull out sort of questions around that. So I think there's institutional trust, and so people who will adopt, like government who will use these LLMs or like sponsor them, that will be responsive to things like a benchmark. I think it's a bit of a stretch to expect farmers to be able to say, like, okay, this is 90% accurate, so I'm going to use it. I mean, I don't look at the benchmarks for any of the LLMs that I use. I wouldn't know how to really interpret them, let alone somebody who works as a farming day to day. And then I think, just also to respond slightly back to, I think it's in the same vein, but what Vikram said earlier about involving farmers in the process. I think that we have to look beyond the idea of what questions they've asked through a chatbot. Like, I think we need to start from where the farmer is, not like what's biased by their interaction and what they expect to get from an LLM. And then on one hand, I think that's shaped by like trajectories of extension service precision. So farmers are biased towards expecting what they can ask an extension officer, which tends to be things like cash crop production. But I think one of the really high aims we want to do with this is to be able to broaden that. So like we want to provide people who are subsistence farmers and how they actually follow their aspirations in terms of nutrition or labor saving. And so I think we need to look at those kind of like things to optimize for, rather than this like very small view of what they're already doing.
And I just want to add one thing there that, usually these kind of studies take a long time because you want to see real impact. However, AI development cycle and the technology is moving very fast and often doesn't give us this long time impact estimation opportunities. So one very interesting and forward-looking, area of work could be simulating these different use cases and possibilities using AI itself, and see what happens and get some sort of proxy predictions. Of course, this is more futuristic, like with world models, we could try to do that and build maybe farmer or farm specific world models and things like that. Anyways, so Sachi, you are back. Do you want to finish your thought?
I think I got good confidence that Vikram was able to pick up as we worked a lot together on the different participants. So, but just saying that at this early stages of these technologies, especially in the smallholder community, agri companies play an important role in both driving the adoption of these tools, and also they're a big user of these benchmark communities and opportunities to build confidence across the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Niriksha, I saw your hand was up.
I was just going to respond to your point, Monojit, which is, I think, yes, like RCTs take a while to get downstream impact outcomes on yields and incomes, but there's a lot of rapid, A/B testing, product design, field work that allows you to get really quick, low-cost feedback from farmers in a real-time way that I think can allow us to get from accuracy at least to adoption. And I think just make sure these benchmarks are getting to those, next steps when thinking about impact. And I think it's worth us collectively utilizing the tools that are available in addition to thinking about simulations and evidence.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, actually. And I'm sure we should be doing more of these other, shortcuts, but still very useful things. Just other than what you said, techno-linguistic benchmarking. That was the word Elliot used, I think. Yeah. Okay. So I think we are almost in time to open up for Q&A, but before we do so, anybody has any concluding remarks or thoughts that you want to share?
I'll add one thing quickly. I think we didn't get to, but just reviewing some of the questions that are in the chat. There's a lot around localization and things and like contextualization. And I think one of the things we haven't really talked about, and we're working on quite a lot at IFPRI and with this Gaia project, is gender sensitive benchmarking, and trying to make sure that like appropriate answers are made for not only, I think it kind of relates to my last point about not only for male landowning cash crop producers, but also the needs and aspirations of female farmers.
Yeah, Vikram.
Just wanted to respond to what Elliot just said. I think that it's really important for us to include the gender sensitive evaluations in our benchmarking efforts. It's part of what we are proposing to do with PXD. And so we are actually looking for help from people who have experience in that area. I know the Gaia project has worked on this. And so, in fact, I was going to be reaching out to Jamu Kim, but if you know others, Elliot, who could help us on that aspect of it, very much welcome that.
Look forward to it, Vikram. Thanks.
Cool. I think we are on time for opening up for audience questions. So thanks to all of you again for this amazing panel. And then I will hand it over to Courtney to do the Q&A with audience.
Yes, thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful discussion. I'm reviewing all of the questions in Q&A right now. I've organized it by the questions that were most upvoted. So I will start from that perspective. The first question that I see, which has the most upvotes, are should we first fix the agriculture and food systems before establishing tamper-proof benchmarking frameworks and metrics? That was upvoted 4 times. Smiles, responses. Go ahead.
I can start. I mean, that's a pretty broad statement, right? Just to fix the agri-food system. I think a lot of the ways we look at these LLMs and is a way to start to deliver on a lot of promises that we've made across that. And it allows us to essentially create infinite scale, infinitely personalized scale, right, of digital solutions that we probably haven't had before. And so you're going to see these things work in parallel where the LLMs are going to start to continue to improve the agri-food value chain. And the way that starts to accelerate is benchmarks is an accelerant to that process and a catalyzation. So benchmarking is as they build the confidence, those tools will get deployed further and built more that allow for better aspects, right, such as democratized, accessible information, better practice and management, better understanding on pricing, et cetera, all the different challenges I think everybody faces because most of agriculture is an asymmetric information problem ultimately. And LLMs will help start to democratize that, and benchmarking will be a catalyst towards that.
Thanks, Sachi. Vikram, did you want to respond to that as well?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we can afford to wait in that sense for at least two reasons. One of them is that people are already starting to use these services. In fact, I've heard from many people in the ag community, both farmers and agronomists and researchers, that they go to systems like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude to ask questions in their day-to-day work. So they're already using them. And there are a number of these services that are being now marketed to these users from the commercial side as well. That's one important reason. And second, as Sachi said, this is not going to the global adoption and development is not a terminating process. It's a continuous process that's going to go on forever. And along the way, we have to keep evaluating the services in order to drive progress.
Thanks, Vikram. We have a hand up in the chat. I can take you off mute. Is it Nazakat Ali?
Sorry, Stuart also has his hand up. Shall we give him?
Sorry.
No problem. I just thought I'd chime in on that question. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things to do. And when we say broken agriculture and food systems, yes, there's massive efforts, global efforts that need to take place to address a lot of these challenges that farmers and food systems are facing with climate change and all sorts of shocks impacting farmers and food systems generally. And this agricultural transformation process of moving from predominantly agrarian societies to industrialized societies has taken hundreds of years in some countries, and more recently decades in places like China. So, I think you have to sort of pick your battles, pick your sort of focus areas. When we look at extension and research and development, in agriculture, that's been one of the catalytic components that drive agricultural transformation. If you can unlock more value at the farm level, if you can empower farmers with bigger, more incomes and more ability to be resilient and to participate in the broader economy, that's what drives change. And so that's why, narrowing in on this specific area on leveraging AI to empower farmers to increase their productivity and incomes is so important. So I just wanted to flag that broader view.
Thanks, Stuart. All right, we have time for 1 to 2 more questions. I'm going to go to the audience now. I can unmute audience members. So the first hand that I see is Nazakat Ali. I'm going to allow to talk now. Let's see. Nazakat, are you there? Hello?
मैं जैसे आ लिए और पैसे ज्यादा भी बच्चे भी कम नहीं है तो पापा से पैसे लेके तब लेके आई हूँ मुझे अरे वो जी
All right. I'm not sure that I'm getting that. We'll try next up. Gilbert. Gilbert. Go ahead, Gilbert.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a question and as well also for the lessons learned on AI and its use in agriculture. My name is Gilbert Mwale. I'm based in Zambia, Lusaka. Been in the agribusiness space tech-wise for the last decade, and currently we are running an organization that is closing up on the skill gap that is found on farms to try and help increase on productivity. So we're doing recruitment and business systems for farm owners, emergent farms to be specific. Now, the question I wanted to ask is that we're doing recruitment for guys with diplomas and certificates and the likes, and we push those into farms, so that they can be able to go and help with adoption of technology and as well as also the right technical skills. Now, I wanted to learn how, seeing it from that perspective, how could I leverage AI in making sure that we are not, most especially during screening, so that we are not leaving out as we try to avoid the 1,000 applications that are coming in for people who are looking for jobs, by not sidelining the right people, and how do we teach these models to get the right best people that suit this kind of situations? Thank you.
Anyone on the panel have a response for Gilbert?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is more around application sorting, etc., and not related to the specific topic, right? Unless I didn't get something.
Yes. It looks like an audience member had an answer for that too. Use AI at the top of the funnel for evaluating applicants. Thank you, Gilbert. Panelists, were there any questions when you reviewed the Q&A section that really stood out to you that you wanted to address?
I've been typing answers to questions for the last since I started talking. So
I saw
I
that.
talk.
I just want to make one general point. Elliot did a good job on this, but a lot of the questions all relate to hyperlocalization and then the idea of the languages and so forth. I think that's actually the development of these tools. Vikram said the foundational models are just getting better and better and better at answering the 80% of the question or 90%. It's really the role of all of us right now is getting that last mile delivery. And that is the hyperlocalization, that is the specific context, and that is the relationship piece of the agricultural puzzle. And that's where we are all focusing, and that's where the benchmarks are actually focusing, right? Vikram talks about the sourcing piece of it and the difficulty of that. The second part is also understanding there's a scale and a gradient about this of um, there's pragmatic answers and complete answers, right? And also balancing that, right? Sometimes a lot of questions are just like, what's the weather like? What products are available here? So forth. And so having a balance of that and this idea that, as Elliot said, and building on is really that colloquial understanding. So the slang into the ecosystem, into the benchmark solutions, as well as the models and answers, the local languages, and the local understanding. And that's where we're all focusing on right now. If you look at all the solutions that the companies that Vikram listed, that's the majority of where the time is spent is on that hyper localization. So I think those questions are well intended, and it's a really deep area of talk and focus. But that is where all the solutions and the benchmarkings are really focusing on is that last mile delivery portion of the solution.
Thanks, Sachi. Any other questions that stood out or last comments before we conclude? All right. Well, thank you, panelists. Before we hand it over to our closing remarks, we wanted to give the room one last moment to contribute to this work and our efforts going forward. So as our closing remarks are happening, we will have two polls pop up. The first question will be, what's one topic you think this community must tackle in the future? And where should IAAI be focusing its research energy right now? What's the problem the field most needs solved? So with that, I will thank all of the panelists. Thank you all very much for joining and giving us your expertise. And I will pass it over to Fatima Almula to give us our closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I hope everybody can hear me. Great. Thank you, and thank you to the entire team in agriculture and for organizing as well today's event, as well as to our partners at the Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI and the Gates Foundation. And Stuart, I'd also like to recognize you for being a champion too, and for your dedication to the cause, which has been, like Monojit said, very inspiring. We've heard a lot of inspiring, thoughtful perspectives from the panelists today, and I think that we can all agree that there remains an important gap that we need to close with respect to advisory services and providing better information faster in order to improve the livelihoods and incomes of people. Stuart, I think you mentioned that there was a potential to improve incomes by about $166 per year. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we need to consider the importance between the innovation and access, and between technology and adoption, and ultimately between potential and impact for farmers and food systems around the world. And among all of this, there's also a responsibility that we have amongst us partners when it comes to developing these tools. We need to ensure that they are accessible to different cultures, languages, communities, and that they're free, and that they are inclusive, and that the right partners are involved, everyone from governments all the way to the farmers on the ground. When it comes to the United Arab Emirates, and along with my colleagues here as well in the UAE, we've intentionally invested in strengthening both the agriculture innovation ecosystem and our advanced AI capabilities. A few ways that we've done this is, number one, the obvious is the Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI, where we have tremendous faculty. We've also had this amazing partnership on agriculture innovation with the Gates Foundation, which we launched at COP28. The UAE has also joined the CGIAR as a donor country, and we aim to reinforce our commitment to championing advancing global agriculture for research and food security and AI. We've also seen through the $1 billion announcement of the AI for Development initiative that was announced at the G20, which aims to also advance digital infrastructure and AI projects across Africa. And finally, through championing the AI agriculture ecosystem that supports the development of this AI-enabled public goods for emerging economies. And central to that component is this effort and is the Institute for AI and Agriculture at the Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI. And together, this creates an innovation pipeline that carries the science from research to scale, and connecting the UAE's capabilities with the broader global agriculture development community. So we've seen that there's been significant investments across AI institution, but really equally important to us is ensuring that these technologies are inclusive, are accessible, and are responsive to the local realities. And ultimately, this will depend on the strong partnerships that we're working on together right here in this room, in this webinar, the many partners that we work together. So I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists and to everyone who has contributed in today's discussion. And really what matters is how we collectively come together to create these conversations essentially into practical and measurable solutions. So thank you very much. And I think I'm passing on back to Monojit to give some information on the upcoming webinars.
Thank you, Fatima. And thanks to the UAE Presidential Court for supporting IAAI alongside Gates Foundation. Thanks also to all of the panelists, and what a fantastic opening session it was. I'm leaving all very excited. But before we close, a reminder that this is a monthly series. So next month, or rather every month, we are going to have one such dialogue, and it will be on different topics. Next month, we will have a session on lost in translation, language localization, and the last mile. And this will dig into a lot of questions which I was saying it's a Pandora's box. Let's not open it right now. So there are lots of questions about languages, how to support cultural context, and so on. And this will be discussed with, again, another set of amazing panelists and experts who have been working in this area for long. So details will be followed shortly. So to get the details or even otherwise, you can join our mailing list. The link should be in the chat right now. And you will get newsletters of IAAI and hear about our future sessions, etc. So with that, let us close today's session. Thank you all, and see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.